going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So on this little series here, we're gonna go through how to get rid of all the vacuum lines on your 84 to 87 carbureted Honda Civic, Civic hatchback, CRX. A lot of times the symptoms to this problem is you got a rough idle or no idle at all. It's hard to start in the mornings because the choke isn't working as it should. Bad fuel mileage. I think I said high idle. Just all kinds of, there's little things that these vacuum systems control and work together with, and when they go bad and the hoses start getting brittle and cracking, and then you have the solenoids and some of the stuff in there that go bad, it just doesn't work right. So in this series, we're going to talk about getting rid of all that and how to make the stock carb work quite well without all this stuff. These cars are great cars. I've had several. The wagon I have, what we're working on, it's got 200,000 miles, which in my book, that's kind of low. But these 1.5s, they get great mileage. I mean, new they were getting 40 to 45 miles a gallon, which now with today's fuel and the carbon buildup and the fuel, you're still going to get the high 30s. They're comfortable cars. I love them. But then again, I've had several of them. But this isn't too hard. If you're mechanically inclined and have a little bit of patience, you can do this. It's pretty simple. That's a lot of the times these cars get sent to the wrecking yard because of these problems. They just don't run terrible, bad fuel mileage. And people don't necessarily like these cars per se. The hatchbacks and the CRXs are more popular than the wagons and the sedans, but this applies to both of them. And I'm doing this video so hopefully I can save a few of these more from, having to go to the wrecking yard or people getting rid of them, or something so simple that they can do. I've done about 20 of these, probably 19 or 20, over the last 15 years or so. So I have this pretty well figured out, but a lot of this information came from a site called redpepperracing.com, which was around for a lot of years. That's where a lot of us 1G and 3G guys kind of came together, and now we've gone to, Facebook's kind of killed these small forums and stuff, so the information's not there anymore. So I felt that it's time that I can actually do this now, that I have a car that I can do this on. I've been wanting to do this for a while. It's just having a car to do this on and having the time. So now that I have a car, I'm going to go ahead and get this done so people can see it's really not that hard, and it's pretty easy to save these cars. Doing this, you get a little bit better fuel mileage. Don't want to make any claims, but definitely feels a little bit more. There's definitely a smidge power gain, because these are a factory 3-barrel carburetor, but it's kind of a weird 3-barrel that works with the CVCC. These are pretty simple cars. So, vacuum advance. It's got a manual fuel pump. They're good, easy running car. You keep them alive. It's like people say, put a timing belt, water pump, and an oil in a Honda, and it'll run forever. My black hatch, the turbo one, it's got 284,000 miles, and I've put boost to it, and still holding up so far. But so I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna get into this. Does your 1984 to 1987 Honda run like shit? Well, I got a solution for you. Come over here. These vacuum lines over the years tend to break down. They just suck. You can do a Weber swap, but that's anywhere $300-400. So in this video, it's gonna be probably 2-3 part series. We're gonna show you how to devac and get rid of all this vacuum line stuff, excuse me, and make it run like it should when it was new. So you're gonna need a 10 millimeter or 12 millimeter, some dikes, some needle nose pliers, and a couple extensions, and then that should be about it for the most part. So we'll get in to start, taking the air cleaner off. I have had a couple of these things off. There's two 10 millimeter bolts that hold the mesh grill over the air cleaner. Throw that in here, undo this, There's a connection down here to undo, a vacuum line to pull off, and then there's a clamp you pull here, and then this is for the valve cover vent, and then you have shit for your EGR over here. Ta-da! So this is the wonderful masterpiece of late 80s Honda emissions and trying to meet US standards. By the time we're done with this, it'll look nothing like this. So the first thing I like to do is just get rid of the stupid emissions boxes. So that's where the dikes come in handy. You don't need any of these hoses anymore, so just cut, cut, cut. The old trusty 10mm, which I may lose these by the end of the video, who knows. So for this black box, you got 2 bolts here and 2 bolts here, and 1 back there. So we'll get this piece off first. So you will want to save this bracket, or this vacuum thing, because it will get reused. Box in. I guess there isn't one down there, so it's just the 3 that hold this box on. And then there's just a single, actually there's 2 connections here, electrical connections that you have to pull off. Just give it the old college try. And then set this off to the side. So there's a few things you can actually rob out of those. And we'll pull the vacuum canister off. Don't need that anymore. And you can take off the old bracket, which is 2 tins. And you can see how much space that just opened up right there. Now this isn't 50 state legal. You can't really get away with this in California or somewhere where they do emissions checks. So kind of at your own risk, and I don't take any responsibility if you break something or mess something up. But a lot of places now, cars this old are kind of exempt from emissions. especially if you put plastic plates on them. So this is just the old vacuum canister bracket, which again can go sideways. And then we'll get, actually we'll just get this box out of the way. This has just got over here, this has 2 electrical connections. I would grab a flathead screwdriver to help pop them out. They are kind of a pain. There goes that mysterious 10mm. So you got those out of the way now. Then you got a bolt back here. You got a bolt 10mm back there. Back there, just kind of rest in this little, I don't know, dealy bob, and just cut the rest of these because where we're going, we don't need these. And you can pull this all off in one unit with like the intake manifold and stuff, but this is, it might be a little bit more work, but then you're not pulling the intake off and having to replace a gasket. And this is typically what goes bad inside these valves and stuff. I'll crack these open to show you guys later. So I go in the trash. This is just the heat tube from the exhaust that feeds into the stock air box, which you don't really need. We'll pull this, cut these. So we'll need this for later. Pull the throttle bolt or throttle cable off. It's a 12. Thanks to be a pain in the butt to get to. So here comes the kind of the more fun aspect of trying to get some of this stuff out. Is set to 10 and a 10. We'll get the EGR stuff off. It's just, most of this is held on by 10mm stuff. Some of it's hard to see into, but this is for the EGR. Dropping the 10s. A lot of people tend to keep these when they do this, because they don't, there's an exhaust patches down here that you have to kind of make a block off for, which I'll show you guys how to do that. If you have a welder, it makes it actually a bit easier, but if not, you can build a block off for it with a grinder and a drill and Sharpie. So we're pulling the EGR tube currently. When you're doing this, make sure your battery is disconnected like I have yet to do. Just note to self. The last thing you want is something sparking and catching on fire. Well, they say do as I say, don't do as I do. pull this tube out of the way. And if all is right, you'll lift up on this. And then, so this is the EGR valve and the EGR canister. I don't know what kind of crazy emissions mumbo jumbo this is there for. So you don't need this anymore. And then we can start. So, or actually that's not, this is the EGR valve. That piece has something to do with EGR and the vacuum weird stuff Honda did back then. Then back here, just a snippy. Then you cut here. Tug, and this is just some of the metal line they used for the vacuum stuff back then. The Accords are, the 80s Accords are the same thing with this. You can do the same thing. They share almost the identical carburetor. I think the Accord carburetor is like 100 or 150 more CFM because it is a 2-liter versus 1.5. Then you have your evap canister. We don't need that anymore. That's just more emission stuff. Where we're going, we don't need that. Don't need this anymore. So now, from at this point, what I like to do, get the throttle cable off, get that tucked out of the way, undo the fuel line and the brake booster vacuum. So that's actually still good. And then the brake booster, which that stinks. There was no gas in this, so, well, at least not on the gauge. So whatever bad gas I'm smelling, who knows where it came from. So this is for your brake booster. It's good to check the hoses, make sure you don't have cracks, because as you can see, this one's pretty hard and brittle there at the end. So then there's two more 10 millimeters. There's one here and here to pull this valve off. So this is one of the block offs you, I guess, don't necessarily have to make, but because you can actually just cap this off, which I'll show you. I'm gonna make a bracket to get rid of that. And then, so at this point, it's about pull the carburetor off, make it 100 times easier to get to the rest of the stuff. Which the carburetor is a 12 millimeter and can be kind of pain to get to. Some of these two back bolts back there can be a real pain. That one's off. And then these two are the fun ones to get to. Pull some more wonderful emission hose stuff off, and we'll see what we can get ourselves into. there's a 10 at the back there. It's not even tight. More cutting. There's a couple wires that need to be addressed back here, but we'll get to that in a minute. Can't remember which one, 2 bolts on this. This can be a little frustrating sometimes, just trying to see, you know, where everything's at. So, let's see. And then here, this valve right here has 2 10 millimeters, but you'll need a shorter extension. Or of course, I can't find mine. So, this valve out. Keep this, and what we'll end up doing is cutting this off, then we can cut out the template, but as I was saying before, you can actually just plug off all these vacuum ports and leave it on, you won't have a vacuum leak. But that's going to go over there for right now. We'll get this valve off. I mean, this realistically, this job for a first timer, I'd give it a weekend potentially, because you don't want to terribly rush. I've done probably 15, 20 of these, so I can kind of blow right through it. But if you're a first timer, there's no need to rush. Just with this, just getting figuring out where the rest of the vacuum hoses are connected. Getting them cut and pulled off. Let's see. Just the old college try. Now you are certainly sure going to potentially bash your knuckles, so be ready for that. There's just more vacuum lines to cut down here. There's one there. That off, and then back in the junk pile. So now we're just down to the carburetor, which I was saying earlier, it's just a couple 12s. There's one here, and then the back one there, wherever I put my needle nose. There's the evap. Trying to get these stupid clamps. Those fuel line clamps are a pain. They make a special tool, but I haven't seemed the urge to get one yet. Which probably wouldn't be a bad investment, but so we'll get the other 12 off. There, and then let's see if I can get this with no bags. That works too. You can break it and then take a flathead screwdriver and kind of potentially pry the hose and the clamp back. Because I'll tell you, after all these years, these hoses do not like to come off very easily. So you got that hose out of the way, and now that other 12 is right down there. Sometimes you gotta get the right angle of the dangle. So go back to a smaller ratchet, different extension. Or if you're fortunate enough to have a 12mm wrench, because mine always seem to disappear. And I'm fresh out of a 12. So thinking. I'm trying 12 point. I don't know if the other one's grabbing like it should. There we go. So there's for the choke, and then another one for the choke down here. There's two connections. Or this is the green one's for the fuel shutdown solenoid, and then there is actually back here is a coolant hose that for some reason, well, I get why Honda, they put this coolant hose there to help heat up the carburetor on cold days. So didn't need that anyways. On cold days, so it runs better, or runs decent when it's cold. Helps the carb heat up. Yeah, half the time they don't usually come off, or they're just super brittle like this and they tear. And make sure you got the rest of your bolts off. Don't lose those. And the carburetor is off. Set this over here on the workbench. So, as you can see, really wasn't that hard. This bracket can come off, which we'll pull that off real quick. It's just a 10 also. So this seems to be becoming a more common problem with these adapters. They're like a plasticky rubber type material, and they tend to crack. Well, as some of you would know from owning these cars, these parts are kind of hard to find, and Honda no longer makes these gaskets, so you have to repair it yourself, or that's where the Weber conversion comes into play, because the Weber has its own adapter. Personally, I like the Weber, but they're expensive, and this one's going to be a pain. They're kind of expensive. I mean, I guess they're only like $300. I mean, some people that's expensive, but the stock carb, the stock motor will do just fine once you get rid of all this junk that they had to put on these to meet the emissions in the 80s. Now, if your car's from like the Midwest or where they salt the roads, this is probably going to be 10 times harder with all the rust that tends to get onto things, but it's totally doable. And then the last thing that you can take off is the actual EGR valve. Sometimes that may be tricky. Oops. Save the gasket if you're going to make a template, which I will be doing. These can also be a pain to get off if, because EGR valve is so much heat that, man, it's shockingly not plugged. It is a little bit, but don't need that where we're going. So the gasket can be a little tricky. So this is the gasket. We'll clean that up, and this is what you'll use to make your template. But So taking everything down, it's not really terribly hard. It's a little time consuming. Just make sure you have the right tools and patience. Like I said, once you remove all this junk from over that's on the floor here, all this emission stuff, it's really pretty simple carburetor. And then by the time we're done, you won't have this. When you do this conversion, you do have to go to a manual choke or no choke at all. So I'll show you guys, go down to NAR parts store and get a manual choke conversion, and we'll make this work just fine. So at this point, this will be a part of the first series. There'll be another one to come here shortly. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.